If you're thinking about buying the ViewHD 5-port HDMI switch to handle your multiple devices, like your Apple TV, Fire TV, PS5, or Xbox on one single 4K TV, hold on just a second, because while this switch promises to simplify your setup, I discovered some surprising problems that you really need to know before clicking that buy button. But here's what surprised me. Despite a solid 4-star rating on Amazon and all those fancy specs, HDMI 2.0B, HDCP 2.2, support for HDR, Dolby Vision, and Dolby Atmos, this switch isn't exactly the plug-and-play miracle some people expect. In fact, there's an unexpected catch that could turn your seamless entertainment dream into a tangled electronics nightmare. Stick with me, and I'll break down everything. What works, what doesn't, who this is actually good for, and why you might want to rethink your options. Plus, I'll toss in some tips to make the best use of it if you decide to take the plunge. Let's dive in. So, why exactly would anyone want a 5-port HDMI switch? If you're like me, your TV is basically a command center for an army of devices, from gaming consoles like the PS5 and Xbox to streaming sticks like Roku Ultra or Apple TV 4K. Instead of constantly plugging and unplugging cables behind your TV, an HDMI switch lets you connect multiple inputs and switch between them with just the press of a button or remote. The ViewHD UHD 5X1B HDMI switch promises that convenience at just $26.95. A pretty attractive price point for something that supports up to 4K UHD video at 60 Hz, HDR, Dolby Vision, and high-speed audio formats. On paper, it sounds like the perfect affordable solution for anyone wanting to upgrade or simplify their home theater setup. But here's the rub. During my testing and research, I encountered some frustrating compatibility and power-up issues that could drive even the calmest tech lover up the wall. For instance, the ViewHD switch requires each device and the switch itself to power up independently and in a certain timing sequence. The manufacturer specifically warns users not to power all the devices and the switch through the same surge protector or power strip. Why? Because differences in how quickly each piece of gear boots up can cause random logic errors and unpredictable switching behavior. That means if you don't stagger powering on your PlayStation, your Roku, and the Switch separately, you might find the Switch freezing or selecting the wrong input. Imagine this. You're ready for your gaming marathon on Xbox, but the Switch decides to stay glued to Apple TV input or worse, no input at all. Talk about a plot twist. This limitation can be a deal-breaker for anyone who prefers a truly plug-and-play experience or who relies on a single power strip for convenience. It's like trying to juggle 5 flaming torches. Exciting but significantly risky if you mess up the timing. And while some users may find this manageable, many reports on Amazon mention repeated frustration with the powering sequence, losing the auto-switching functionality, or requiring constant manual resets. Now, speaking of auto-switching, that's another area where the ViewHD 5-port HDMI switch promises some convenience but delivers mixed results. The switch has a programmable input auto-switching function that you can toggle by pressing and holding the switch button for 5 seconds. Sounds neat, right? The idea is that if you power on a device, the switch will automatically change to that input without any remote fuss. But in real-life use, this feature can be inconsistent. The auto-switch function sometimes fails to recognize newly powered devices, leaving you stuck manually cycling through inputs. So if you bought this switch expecting flawless auto-switching, brace yourself. The poor execution makes a product that's seemingly smart behave more like your forgetful friend who can't quite remember the plan. And don't even get me started on the remote control. It's included, which is nice, but the IR sensor isn't very responsive sometimes, especially if there's any obstruction or if your switch is placed inside a cabinet or behind your TV. Pointing the remote at the switch might feel like a game of chance. You might wonder if the remote's batteries are dying, only to realize it's just the IR receiver's weak sensitivity. It's funny, but not the laugh out loud kind of funny, more like the why would you do this to me kind of funny. Speaking of humor, here's one for you. Why don't switches ever get invited to parties? Because they always want to turn things off. To give credit, audio pass-through support is solid on this switch. It supports all HDMI audio formats specified in HDMI 2.0b, including Dolby Atmos, which audiophiles will appreciate if your AV setup can take advantage of it, so your immersive sound experience won't suffer. Also, compatibility spans a wide range of devices. Fire TV 4K, Roku Ultra, Xbox, PS4, Chromecast Ultra, Apple 4K, Ultra HD Blu-ray players, cable and satellite receivers, and more. So if you have multiple gadgets, it really covers the bases. But here's a question you might be asking. Who exactly is this switch right for? I'd say, if you're someone with a mid-level home entertainment setup who is okay with some extra fiddling, like making sure devices are powered on in the right order and willing to tolerate manual switching when auto switch goes rogue, this might work for you. Maybe you have a dedicated shelf where you can keep the switch in plain sight to avoid remote issues. Or you want a budget option because you don't need the fanciest, premium features found in more expensive switches. However, if you're a tech minimalist wanting smooth, seamless, no-hassle switching with all devices powered by a single strip, or if your gear setup needs constant use of auto switching without a hitch, this probably isn't your best bet. On the durability side, the build quality is average. It's a compact black box with the usual HDMI ports that feels lightweight. No fancy metal casing here, mostly plastic, so handle with some care. The included 5V1A power adapter works fine, but is a standard fair power brick, nothing fancy. Packaging is straightforward. The HDMI switch, IR remote, power adapter, and a user manual are all included. One funny observation: remember how smart devices keep evolving to be AI-ready or smart? Well, this switch isn't smart enough to know when you're binge-watching and wishes you'd press the button faster. It's like the technology equivalent of your grumpy uncle who prefers the manual way. Here's a joke to keep it light. Why did the HDMI switch break up with the TV? Because it felt like it was being switched around too much. Now, let's talk about troubleshooting because, believe it or not, many users on Amazon have to lean heavily on support forums and user reviews for solutions. Common issues include flickering video, failed HDR pass-through, laggy switching, or the dreaded no-signal screen. Some fixes include replugging cables, using shorter HDMI cables, ensuring devices are fully updated, and again, powering devices up one at a time. It can get tedious really fast. Of course, nobody wants to spend hours fiddling with their HDMI switch when it's supposed to make life simpler, not harder. To sprinkle a little more humor before we wrap, why did the gamer bring a ladder to the HDMI switch? To get to the next level. But seriously, if you want smooth level switching, this isn't quite it. So how does the ViewHD 5-port HDMI switch compare to alternatives? There are definitely more expensive switches from brands like Kinivo or Fosman that offer more stable auto switching, better-built remotes, and sometimes superior HDR and HDCP compatibility. That said, those come with a much higher price tag, 2 to 3 times the cost of the ViewHD. It's a classic trade-off between budget and convenience. If your budget is tight and you're willing to do some setup work, this switch strikes the middle ground. To summarize, the ViewHD 5-port HDMI switch is a budget-friendly way to consolidate up to 5 HDMI sources on one 4K TV, supporting big-name devices and high-end specs in theory. However, it falls short in power management and auto-switching reliability. The remote control is mediocre, and setup requires patience to avoid random errors. Its strength lies in good audio support and wide compatibility across devices. It's best suited for tech-savvy users or those willing to accept a bit of manual intervention in exchange for decent performance at a low cost. If you think you can handle the quirks and want to save yourself the premium prices, it's worth a shot. And hey, sometimes learning a bit of patience is cheaper than upgrading your entire home theater setup, right? Just remember to power on devices carefully and don't overload a single surge protector. Before I let you go, here's a last joke. Why was the HDMI switch feeling stressed? Too many connections and not enough support. All right, I'll stop now. If you want to see the current best price for the ViewHD 5-port HDMI switch on Amazon, I've left the link in the description below. Prices tend to change quickly, so if this sounds like the right solution for you, it's smart to grab it sooner rather than later. Thanks for sticking through this honest review. Hopefully, now you're better equipped to make an informed decision and avoid any surprises with your HDMI switch setup. Happy viewing!